Former President Trump's fundraising efforts, meanwhile, heating up as we get closer to the election. Last week, Trump met with Florida Governor and former presidential primary competitor Ron DeSantis to discuss potential joint fundraising. My next guest is co-hosting a Manhattan fundraising dinner for Trump later this month. Joining me right now is Witkoff Group Chairman and CEO Steve Witkoff. Steve, great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here. So you organized that first meeting between President Trump and Governor DeSantis. Good for you. Congrats on that. That was a big deal. How did that happen? Tell us more about that.
Well, the president is a dear friend, and he's always been friends with the governor, and the governor is a friend as well, too. And it was time, I think, for them to come together, and both wanted to. And so we met, and we spent a few hours together, and it was a really productive result.
Well, President Trump spoke very nicely about Governor DeSantis. Do you think that he would actually try to use him as his VP candidate?
My gosh, that's his choice.
Do you want to see that?
I feel like I'm the friend of the president. If he asks me a question, I like to answer it. If not, I sort of stay a bit quiet.
Okay, well, Politico is putting out a piece titled Trump's Apprentice, Veep Stakes, TV Hits, Fundraising, and Attacking Biden writes this: the list of those under consideration is long, according to two people familiar with the process who were granted anonymity to speak freely. Trump, they say, has been adding names to the roster. Steve, you were quoted in this piece explaining what factors stand out to the 45th president as the race tightens for a VP pick. And I asked President Trump the same thing when he joined me earlier this year. I'll tell you what he said to me first. Here's the president with me when I asked him about the vice presidential pick. Watch. Mr. President, when will you announce who your VP is?
Not for a while. I mean, we have so many great people in the Republican Party, but not for a while.
Well, what criteria are you using to identify who your running mate is?
Always, it's got to be one thing. It's got to be who would be a good president. I mean, you always have to think that because, you know, in case of emergency, things happen, right? No matter who you are, things happen. It's got to be number one.
I thought that was such a smart answer, Steve. What do you think the president's thinking about, President Trump is thinking about as he zeroes in on who that person is?
I think he cares for the country, number one. He always talks about that, and I'm with him quite a bit. So that comes as no surprise to me.
How is the fundraising going, Steve? I know that you're going to be doing this dinner coming up, but you've been involved in a lot of the fundraising activity around President Trump. What can you tell us?
I think that people are coming around now. He's always had strong fundraising, but now people are beginning to see the poll numbers. They're beginning to see the difference between the president on the issues and President Biden. And I think there's a groundswell out there.
Yeah, well, look, Biden's DOJ wants to stop that groundswell, wants to keep President Trump in a courtroom and on trial. Do you worry that these things are going to stop his return?
I think I said this to the president yesterday, that they come after him, try to persecute him, and he seems to do better because of it. The voters, I think, are beginning to understand that he's being persecuted, and it can happen to them.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what people are taking away from all of this. From the raid at Mar-a-Lago and then we find out that the evidence was tampered with, to what we're seeing and Stormy Daniels going on stand and talking about all these salacious details that have nothing to do with the case.
And he doesn't complain. He never plays the victim.
Yeah.
If I call him and I say to him, "How are you doing?" he says to me, "You're not worried about me, Steve, are you? I'll worry about you."
That's incredible. That is incredible. So in terms of the money being raised, what else does President Trump need to do you think?
Well, in terms of VP candidates, is that what you're referring to?
Well, either way, or just getting back to the White House.
Yeah, I think, well, in terms of VP candidates, and I said it in that quote, I think he cares about A, who can help him to raise capital, and B, who's going to be tough, who's going to be strong on the issues, who's going to, I use the word lion's den, get on TV, go into the lion's den and talk the talk, like he does, because I think that that's important.
I mean, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of your colleagues in the industry come out and speak favorably about President Trump at this point. I mean, given what we're seeing, the two sides of justice and the attacks and all these indictments on him and the fact that he continues to be #1 in the polls, I'm surprised that you don't see more people like yourself. You say there's a groundswell. Is it from the real estate industry? Is it business executives in general? Who? From ordinary people?
Well, I have a home in Kentucky. I travel a lot. I hear the groundswell I'm referring to is outside of New York, outside of the bubble, you just hear people are pro-Trump from all stripes. All my friends call me now. They all want to know what they can do.
Okay.
And so I think that's when I refer to a groundswell, that's what I'm talking about, Maria.
Yeah, and you know, you look at the polls, and most people will say that they trust President Trump over President Biden on the economy. You're a businessman. What can you tell us about the differences in policies versus, you know, the Trump policies versus the Democrat/Biden policies?
Well, the border's a disaster. I was at Eagle Pass with the president. I traveled with him there. Everybody to a person was there who was there. We're cheering for him. We're there for him. We flew into an airport 51 miles away, and we took the motorcade 51 miles to Eagle Pass. And everybody was outside with American flags cheering for the president. He is so well received in most parts of this country, maybe all parts of this country. And in fact, the president even thinks he can turn New York. So.
Yeah. And yeah, that's right. He's talked about doing something big at Madison Square Garden at some point.
Yeah, and that would be fabulous, wouldn't it?
Let me get your take on the broader macro story and real estate. Steve, we've had predictions on this program of up to, I don't know, $1 trillion in defaults coming for the commercial space, specifically when it comes to office space. What are you seeing?
Well, they pump so much money into the system, and now you have the Fed, and they can't drop rates. I think the president is intent on strong economics. He's intent on opening up, engendering again an independent energy policy. Strong. Those are all disinflationary things. And he's intent on paying down the national debt. We had a long discussion about it the other day. So, but you hear none of that from this current administration. The president is so strong on economics, he understands it very well.
You're talking about President Trump.
I'm talking about President Trump.
Yeah, because President Biden is saying that, you know, he gave an interview yesterday, and he said that when he walked into the Oval Office, inflation was higher than where it is today. I mean, it's just not true. We know that the CPI was at 1.4% when he walked in after Trump's economy. But specifically to real estate, Steve, are you worried that we could see these defaults happen and the full impact of 11 rate hikes by the Federal Reserve to really play out and perhaps see a big economic disruption this year?
Well, we're seeing it already. I mean, there's so much multifamily. People are referring to the office buildings where there is a problem, but there's a problem in the multifamily sector. So many of these large funds bought multifamily when rates were 1% and 2%, and they were financing them with positive leverage, and now rates have outstripped those internal returns, and there's a big problem in this country. In California, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
New York as well.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Gavin Newsom is out with these ads saying California's great.
No, California's in trouble.
Yeah. Do you think that the Fed will lower interest rates this year?
I believe they will.
And will they get political, do it before the election?
That I can't tell, because I think everything's political these days, unfortunately.
You're right. Steve, it's great to have you this morning. I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so
My pleasure.
much. Steve Witkoff joining us.